All right. And here we go. Hey now, ladies and gentlemen. Over the Line podcast back again. So glad to be here with another interview podcast. Haven't done one in a while. We try to pump these out like once a month if we can. You know, just we got to rely on other people's schedule when it comes down to it. It's hard to get people in studio and all that jazz. Today's going to be a little different. We don't have them in studio, but we've got them here with us via video. I'll tell you who that is in just a second. First, I want to give a shout out, very, very special shout out to my boys at Wild Hair Jerky. Best beef jerky on the market, baby. Bar none. I'm telling you, this is the best of the best. And y'all know me. I like to eat. I've had a lot of beef jerky in my day. A lot of it. Even Buc-ee's beef jerky. Y'all know I live near a Buc-ee's. I've had a ton of their beef jerky. And I hate to do it to the beaver, but the rabbit, I think, has got them beat. Wild Hair Jerky, best beef jerky, any kind of flavor you can think of, they've got you covered. They're ready to open up and start serving the general public. What you need to do, go to Wild Hair Jerky's Facebook page, add them real quick, and then you'll be updated. Once they're ready to go, you can order. You got the best beef jerky on the planet, and you will be one happy camper. Also, Vapor Forge out on 280. Best vape shop in the business. Y'all know that. They've been with us since day one. Everything we've done on this podcast, on the radio show, they have supported us every step of the way, and we can never thank them enough for that. So go check them out on Highway 280, right next to Bailey Brothers, 4673, Highway 280, 205, 874-9010, 874-9010, and online, vaporforge.com. Without further ado, as you guys know, I haven't really told anybody we were doing this interview, but I'm very excited to announce it. The one and only Jake Chansley is joining us here live on the Over the Line podcast. Jake, how are you, buddy?
Doing good. How you doing?
Good, man. I cannot express the absolute stress that I've gone through just to get the technical side of this hammered out, because it is... I'm not the smartest guy on the planet, especially when it comes to computers and Streamlabs and streaming and all this stuff. And I've had to have so much help to be able to put this together. And you would think it's just like Zoom. It's like a video chat that everybody in the corporate world has ever had to do. I don't have that kind of brain power. You know, when we used to be told, like, hey, you know, for you guys that are out there working blue-collar jobs, you better learn how to code. I should have learned how to code. I'd be in a lot better position. But, man, thanks for taking the time and hanging out with us, man. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. Much better than being in prison, so I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
I can imagine. So most people know you as the QAnon Shaman is what, you know, you were when you first hit the national scene. That's what everybody was calling you. Is that a name that you had for yourself?
Nope.
That's what. See, and I had this debate with somebody the other day. I was like, I don't know that he actually called himself the Q. Well, what did you call yourself when you first started doing the shaman stuff?
Well, when I had my YouTube channel, where I was talking about a lot of this shamanic stuff and exposing the deep state and talking about energy frequency and vibration and the deep underground military bases and classified weapons and all that stuff, I went by Yellowstone Wolf.
Okay. And you were just a regular guy with a YouTube channel?
Well, I'm anything beyond regular, but yeah.
Right. So what did you do? I know, and I'm just basing this off of what little knowledge I have of your background. You started doing some things, obviously outside of YouTube, in Arizona. You're from Arizona originally, I guess, at different protests and things of that nature. One article I saw said something about you showing up at Black Lives Matter protest. Is that right?
Yeah, to march with the police.
And
I showed up as like a counter protester.
And what was the backstory on that? Anything special, or you were just out there voicing your opinion to tell people, hey, you know, I'm pushing back on this?
Well, it started out because I know that BLM and Antifa were like rioting all over the country. So I showed up at the protest to make sure like that ain't going to happen in my city. I
It,
also showed up to march with the police. I brought my sign. Q sent me. I had the regalia on. I did try to speak with the members of the Black Lives Matter and Antifa to try to basically red pill them and like tell them like, look, you guys, you don't quite understand what it is you're supporting here. Um, but my message fell on deaf ears.
right. And
So I just continued to march at the police. What really did it for me and made me go, okay, you know what? Everything, was going to be fine as far as the police. They're not going to attack the police. They're not going to riot. Was attending several of these events, marching with the police and seeing that nothing was going crazy. And then at one of their rallies, a bunch of people showed up with rainbow flags that had satanic pentagrams on them.
hmm,
And they also had the satanic pentagram on their COVID masks and on their shirts. They were calling each other comrade. They had Chinese Communist Party flags and the hammer and the sickle and all that stuff. And I was just like, holy crap.
yeah.
I don't want to be anywhere near this.
So it legitimately freaked you out, and you decided, hey, I'm just going to back
Well,
off.
I don't want to say it freaked me out. I realized I'm not doing any good here.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to change anybody's mind, no matter how kind and gentle I am about relaying the message. So, and they didn't want to hear from me anyway, you know?
Right.
So why try? Why keep wasting my time and showing up? And like the satanic pentagrams really kind of like made me go, okay, these people are on another side of all of this, black magic. They're on that side, and they're open about it.
Did it seem like they knew what they were wearing, or they were representing? Like they seemed like people that were like, yeah, we're down with the dark side and the pentagrams and everything else. They didn't come off as people that were just ignorant on the issue. They knew what they were doing, right?
Well, yeah, it wasn't like the flags were everywhere. The same people that were carrying the flag with the rainbow flag with the satanic pentagram, were the same group of people that were wearing it on their shirts and on their COVID masks. But what I found alarming was that nobody else was like taken aback by this. Nobody else that was in the crowd was taken aback by this, and they were open to these people marching with them.
Hmm.
I'll tell you right now, if somebody came up to one of my rallies or something like that with the satanic pentagram on their flag, I'd be like, look, dude, you either got to get rid of that thing or you got to go.
Right. That's that's a little bizarre, but the left obviously they pride themselves, or they say they pride themselves on tolerance, unless of course you show up to the rally with the Bible or something of that nature. But that's another level. I think I would be asking questions if the satanic symbols started showing up, because it could be detrimental to your message. So you're out in Arizona, you're doing those things, you're deciding, okay, this is not worth it. I'm not going to fool with this. What's next for you? What do you do after that? Do you decide you're going to quit going to rallies like that, or what?
Well, then I did a video on my YouTube exposing the whole damn thing.
Hmm.
Just saying, like, I went to these things, I marched with the cops, this is what I saw, this is what was going on. Another thing that really kind of turned me off from the whole thing was everybody was so angry,
Yeah.
and they were yelling and screaming with like real hatred and anger in their hearts. And I'm just thinking to myself, my God, this is not what I want to be a part of at all. Even if I'm here marching with the police, I don't like the vibe of these people. So not all of them, but many of them. So I mean, if I'm trying to red pill them and it's falling on deaf ears, and they don't want me there, and they're not going to harm the police, and they have satanic pentagrams on some of their flags, and they have communist flags, and they're calling each other comrade, I'm out of there.
Right.
That's
Right.
the final straw. But the thing is that I was going to Trump rallies I was going to, there was a QCon here in Phoenix. I was going down to my state capital for years before 2020, dressed in my regalia, protesting and talking to and uh, trying to coerce through peace and love the politicians that were in power at the time. And that I've been doing that for years.
Yeah.
So this idea that somehow I showed up on January 6th dressed that way was the first time is a ridiculous notion.
Well, and I think for the nation as a whole, January 6th was the first time a lot of people saw you. And you don't normally see people in that sort of get up on a regular basis. And I'm kind of at fault for it as well. When January 6th went down, people like myself, our first suspicion was there were people infiltrating the Trump supporters and instigating this. And when I saw your outfit, I told myself, hey, we don't dress like that. Trump supporters don't dress like that. That's obviously Antifa. And as the days played out and we saw how everything went, it turned out, no, this guy is actually not Antifa. That just happens to be his getup. But and I'll get to that in a second. I kind of want to get some background from you on. You said you went to a QCon. You said you didn't identify, or you never identified as the QAnon Shaman, right?
That was a label given to me by Alex Jones after January 6th, and the media ran with it. And then they started spreading the disinformation that I gave myself that name and that title, and that's what I called myself. Not true at all.
Wow. So what was the name you gave yourself? Like on YouTube, your name was what would you say it was?
Yellowstone Wolf.
So that was what you called yourself just across the board, Yellowstone Wolf.
Yep.
And then QAnon Shaman came out. And when somebody like Alex Jones puts that out there, I mean, you can't really get that off. It's kind of stuck with you, I mean, especially in this situation, right?
Yeah, whatever. As far as I can tell, they used the name QAnon Shaman to create a straw man.
Right.
A straw man that they could then place labels and all sorts of propaganda to that would cause people to have a polarized view on that day.
Right. Give me some background on QAnon itself, because I think there's a large part of my audience, and probably even myself, that doesn't understand not necessarily what QAnon turned out to be, but what you believed QAnon to be, say, at that time, 2018, 2019, and even 2020. Just explain to those that would be ignorant on it.
Well, first, let's start with the question that QAnon and the QAnon community is very different from Q and the Q posts. So if you look at the Q posts and you know about cryptology and encoding information, and then you look at the numerical code that is in the Q posts, and you look at the timestamps between when Donald Trump is tweeting and when Q does his post, or Q does their post, rather. And if you know about the Q clock and the dates that are above each of the numbers on the Q clock and how all those dates are different, how if you look up the posts on those days that are above each of the different numbers, then all of the dates and the posts on, say, all the dates above 12, all of those posts end up creating a bigger message. And these are like spread out over months, weeks, years. So it's equivalent to the highest levels of the intelligence agencies and the military intelligence dumping a 5,000 piece puzzle on the table of the internet and saying, put the puzzle together.
So
And
you're saying that QAnon was, if we say Q was a person or Q was a group, that was actually the intelligence agencies?
well, it has all the marks of military intelligence and the intelligence agencies as far as the encrypted nature of the communication and cryptology. That's how the military communicates. You communicate through encrypted code so that your enemy can't decipher that code. Now, in particular with Q, they wanted people to learn the gap code, learn the timestamps, know the Q clock, and learn how encryption works, learn how cryptology works. And so it is a psychological operation. It is a psyop. But what is a psychological operation? A psychological operation is an operation designed to influence the psyche. Now, is it influencing people's psyche to be divided into groups that hate each other and are arguing all the time? No. It's designed to get information to the people and supersede the Operation Mockingbird media and their narrative. And because people are putting the puzzle together on their own, the neuro-linguistic programming that has been done by the Operation Mockingbird media is undone. And people follow this trail of breadcrumbs. And because Q asks questions, as opposed to telling what people to think, instead of telling people what to think, Q asks people to think for themselves by asking questions. So the QAnon community, the people that were following Q, that community was heavily infiltrated because of the message that Q was bringing.
Did we lose you? Let's see if I'm still. Oh, there we go.
Now? There we go.
You're back. You're back.
Okay. So look at it kind of like this. If a message were getting to the public about the nature of corruption in the government, and the media was a part of that corrupt apparatus, then whoever it is that's behind this psychological operation that we call the Operation Mockingbird media, or that we call the government corruption and the politicians, and it is a psychological operation, it's been ongoing for a long time, then those people are going to attempt to infiltrate the QAnon community and spread disinformation. And this is normal. This is how this stuff works. So they would infiltrate the community. They'd pretend that they're rah on the side of the QAnons. And then they would start disseminating disinformation that could easily be disproven later. So the idea that JFK Jr. is alive and going to be Donald Trump's vice president, that's disinformation. The idea that the earth is flat is disinformation.
Right.
Okay. So the truth about our financial system being corrupt and based in debt and thusly enslaving the American people, the idea that human and child trafficking, or basically human and child slavery, is the most prevalent and lucrative black market industry on the planet, and thusly is being used to blackmail politicians, entertainers, CEOs, international bankers, right? These ideas, or like the Q talks a lot about energy and 0 point energy and free energy and stuff like that. Those things will completely obliterate this global new world order system. So it's then the globalist attempts, they're going to go into the QAnon community, spread this disinformation, get people to believe that JFK Jr. is alive or the world is flat, and then in this way they can contaminate all of these other ideas that are very real and very true.
You know what's crazy is you were explaining all of that. I mean, to be honest, it was kind of hard to follow, but as you got towards the end of that right there, it all started making sense. And it's funny because on our radio show, I had brought this up over the past couple days about how so many people people in power have been blackmailed, and that is dictating the decisions they make, whether they're in power through politics or the media or whatever, that somebody else is pulling the strings because they've got a certain level of dirt on them. Just take Jeffrey Epstein, for instance. And so I think you're dead on that point, and what you're trying to say is that QAnon had a lot of things figured out, but the powers that be infiltrated it and started putting crazy theories inside of it in order to make those people seem crazy. So when they brought up the truthful stuff, they would just be dismissed by the general public. Have I got that?
Absolutely.
Okay. So at the time leading up to January 6, 2021, where were you at mentally with QAnon? Were you all in? Were you like, how were you viewing QAnon at that point?
Well, once again, let's make the clear distinction between QAnon community and Q. Okay. So when it comes to Q, I knew what it was. It was a psyop, and it's a good psyop. It doesn't mean it's bad. Just because it's a psyop doesn't mean that it's a lie. It means it's a psychological operation. It is an operation intended to affect the psyche of the public.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, do we want to affect the psyche of the public in a way that allows them, the public, to be awake or asleep? We want them to be awake. So how would we go about doing that? A psychological operation. That's how.
Right.
And it has to be a very well formulated, a very strategic, and a very step-by-step process to lead people out of the dark and into the light. So when it comes to my beliefs about Q, they haven't changed. Even after everything that happened to me, even before January 6th, after all that stuff, it hasn't changed. The QAnon community, my beliefs, once again, haven't changed. What we're talking about is something called a fifth column. Fifth columns are people that infiltrate communities, and they pretend to be on the side of the people in the community. Then, when there's a very important event or a crossroads that community is at, then the fifth column pulls themselves out from underneath the structure of the movement. And this destabilizes the whole movement.
That makes sense. And I'm just trying to run through it in my head because it's a lot to take in for me and many others, in the sense of we've never sat down and talked to anybody about what QAnon actually is, or the difference between QAnon and just Q and everything else. I think I'm grasping what you're trying to say, and you're trying to make the point that you've seen it for what it was from the very beginning, which I get that part. So you've got that mindset. Take me to January 2021. You find out that Donald Trump, you've seen what's happened in the election in 2020. We all saw it for what it was. Nobody, Joe Biden didn't get 81 million votes, yada, yada. We're all on the same page there. At what point did you hear that Donald Trump was holding the Stop the Steal rally, and at what point did you decide you were going to attend?
Well, what a lot of people don't know is I went to the second MAGA Million March in December, on December 12th of 2020. And I went dressed in my regalia.
Yeah.
You know, no media attention or anything. So I thought when I went on, January 6th, that it was going to be peaceful like it was on December 12th. I was completely under the impression that everything was going to be fine. I had no idea what the hell was going to happen.
You were just doing what you always do.
Just doing what I always do, baby.
And so you show up on January 6th. Just describe to me what your day's like. Like, you wake up in the morning, you head to the Capitol, you with a group of people, group of friends, what?
Well, yeah, we drove there together, a group of patriots from here to Arizona into D.C. And we got separated very early in the morning. And shortly thereafter, after Trump's speech, is when I went down to the Capitol. But the thing is, I can't really talk too much about that day because I have a motion in the courts right now.
Gotcha.
And my lawyer has advised me just stay away from any topics regarding that and the events of that day. But I can talk about, before and what my opinions are. I can talk about after and what jail was like and prison and all that. That's not a big deal. But the event of that day, can't go into it.
Yeah, and you and I didn't discuss beforehand what you can and can't talk about, but hey, we can wing it and figure it out as we go. So we go through that day, and I mean it's pretty well documented in the sense of what got you there. They come and arrest you on the 9th. From what I understand, I'm sure that's correct.
They didn't come and arrest me.
What happened?
I turned myself in.
And how did you get the word that you needed to turn yourself in?
Well, my family was calling me, telling me the FBI was looking for me.
So
I called the FBI.
Wow. So they saw you on TV, and you just called them on your own. What did they say when you called them?
They just said they wanted to talk to me. They kept asking me where I was.
Right.
And I was on the road, so I didn't know. I was like, I don't know. I'm somewhere in Kentucky right now.
He said, we want to talk to you. Yeah.
Yeah.
That old guy.
It was only misdemeanors at the time. So I didn't think too much of it because I didn't hurt anybody. I didn't steal anything.
Right.
I didn't vandalize any property.
Well, yeah, in your situation, like with what you had experienced that day, and again, we're not going to get into it, but you had no reason to believe that they wanted to do anything other than talk to you. Like, you're like, I just walked through there with police as an escort. Like, it was just a normal day. Like, I did nothing wrong. I wasn't chastised. And so that's crazy. So you go turn yourself in. What happens when you turn yourself in?
Well, they told me that they just wanted to talk to me, and I said, that's fine. So I went down to the FBI field office here in Phoenix when I, arrived in Phoenix, and they took me into an interrogation room. They read me my Miranda rights, and I was like, oh shit.
Oh no.
You guys said you weren't going to arrest me, And then they said, so do you want to cooperate? Do you want to talk to us? And I was like, well, I'll tell you my side of the story. I don't have a problem with that. I have nothing to hide. Whether or not that was the right decision to make, the way I look at it, dude, is I live by the truth. If I live by the truth, then life becomes very simple. Not always easy, but simple.
Right. Well, let's be honest, that's an honorable way to live. But unfortunately, and you see this in your experience, that came around to bite you in the ass. And
well, kind of.
In a sense, at least at that time it did. When they asked you if you wanted to cooperate, and you said, yeah, sure, I don't have anything to hide. Do you then explain to them your side of the story, or did they seem disinterested in hearing anything you got to say?
Dude, the FBI will let you talk.
Yeah. I can imagine. So you sat there and chatted with them for a minute. Do you get released after that, or is that the last time you saw the light of day?
Dude, that was the day I got arrested.
Yeah. And so they throw you in on what charges?
Oh, just a couple misdemeanors, and I thought I might be in jail for a couple days, and then they slammed me with felonies like a week later.
And you find that out sitting in a jail cell. What about, you've obviously got attorneys now. Did you have an attorney in those early days or no?
Well, not when I did my initial arraigning here in Arizona. I had a court-appointed attorney, but he was terrible.
Yeah, I can imagine. It seems though, and again, stop me if I'm crossing the line on any of this stuff, but from the outside looking in, that seems, in Washington, D.C., that seems like a fixed game, especially when you're in that system with court-appointed attorneys. It would seem as if the attorneys are on the same team as the prosecutors, which puts you in a no-win situation. Is that what you felt like was happening with your situation?
Well, the original, arraignment, that was the only time I had a public defender. Shortly thereafter, Al Watkins contacted my mother. And then my mother put me in contact with Al Watkins, and he told me that he was, a constitutionalist, that he was a Republican, that he thought what was happening to me was a travesty, and he'd been a federal attorney for 30 something years, and he wanted to represent me for free. And I thought, okay, I mean, he represented those folks in St. Louis that came out of their house with the guns when those Black Lives Matter and Antifa were threatening to burn their house down.
Yeah.
And so that case got won. I did not know until later that he didn't really do much. They were actually attorneys themselves. He just kind of filed the paperwork for him. So I didn't know the extent of his deception, that he was actually like, Democrat media whore, and, that he was going to all of these media outlets and saying stuff that I never asked to say, things that I never okayed him to say. I also didn't know that he had, from what I understood, from what people have told me, he's donated to Democrats on several occasions.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of deception. And when I look back at his representation of me, it now makes sense why it is that things went the way that they went.
How long was Al Watkins your attorney? Like, was it a year, year and a half?
No, it was like 11 months,
10
months, something like that.
I didn't realize it on the backside, but I started getting those vibes too, because I started following your case a little bit. And as I saw Watkins doing these TV interviews and the things he was saying in defense of you, I thought to myself, I don't think this guy's really fighting for Jacob. And it was when on Tucker Carlson's show, your new attorney, which may be your current attorney now, he comes in and he starts talking about Watkins. And he says, when I look through the deal that Watkins convinced Jake to sign, that he cut with the prosecutors, no reasonable defense attorney, would have ever offered this to their client, especially when the prosecutor wasn't even offering it. He was basically just waving everything away and saying, hey, we'll just let you throw me in prison, put up no fight whatsoever. Is that essentially what happened?
Well, here's the thing. My attorney also told me, because our motion is regarding the ineffective assistance of counsel, not to really talk about the litigation that Al was going through and all that stuff. Let's just say he abhorrently misrepresented me.
Yeah.
And if I could go back and do it all over again, that is one thing that I would definitely change, is Al Watkins being my attorney.
That's got to be discouraging, though. And let's just talk about your time in prison, as to, just going. You go from just going in to talk to sitting in a cell to a few days later finding out there's felony charges, scrambling to get an attorney, getting that attorney, and getting drug along until you part ways with that attorney. What's prison life in the meantime? What's your mental state? Where do they got you at? How are the guards treating you?
Solitary confinement was hell. That was terrible. Most people don't quite realize how terrible it is, especially when you have a maximum of 25 years hanging over your head. Dude, stress, the pressure, the inability to do anything about it, having to just go through it. I mean, in the hole, bro, days seem like weeks, weeks seem like months, months seem like years.
I can't imagine. You're talking 20, 23 hours a day? Are you getting out for an hour a day? 22 hours a day.
But I wasn't able to go outside.
So what was the other 2 hours?
I could either get on the phone, get in the shower, or watch TV.
And you probably spent most of that on the phone trying to figure out what's going on, right?
Talking to family. Yeah.
Man, and you're just
I
sitting in there.
showered, but I always like try to do my shower at the end after I've talked to my family.
So how long are you in the hole? How long are you in solitary confinement before you get? Do they put you in general population after that?
No, no, I was in solitary confinement for 10.5 months.
And then after that, at the end of that 10.5 months, what
Then
happens?
eventually I was moved to Oklahoma where I was in general population. And that's like a transfer, like a transit station for federal inmates. And then they moved me to Safford, Arizona, where I spent the remainder of my prison term.
Wow. What about we've heard a lot of, or I personally have read a lot of stories about the treatment of January 6th prisoners, especially in D.C., by the guards, by the staff. Um, your experience with that?
Well, I was only in DC jail for 11 days. They would not accommodate my organic diet, which eventually was court ordered, and they could not. They say that they couldn't afford it. Give me a break.
Right.
I think it was that they didn't want to admit a loss, that the judge ordered them to do it and they had to do it. So they transferred me over to Alexandria Detention Center. It's like a skip, a hop, and a jump away from the DC jail. There, they kind of fed me organic. Like it wasn't fully organic. Now that I look back on it and remember, like, oh yeah, they did this, they did that. Like they gave me like organic peanut butter and jelly when everybody else wasn't getting organic peanut butter and jelly. They were getting like an organic ham sandwich or something,
Right.
you know. But they didn't really like do what it is they were supposed to do. But in the DC jail, dude, that was the very first time I ever experienced racism in my entire life.
Really?
Oh yeah, that most of the guards were people of color, and they believed the Operation Mockingbird media that all Trump supporters are racists and that they're white supremacists and all this other crap. So, like one of the guards or COs in the DC jail actually was wearing a Black Lives Matter COVID mask, and he was notorious, according to what the guys in the jail were saying, for harassing Trump supporters.
And you were the most infamous Trump supporter in all of the jail.
Yeah, well, I'll say this. At first, they really didn't care about my suffering. They were really apathetic at first. But then, as the days went on and they saw that I wasn't eating, then it's interesting how my suffering kind of opened their hearts a little bit. It softened them, from stone to flesh.
Yeah.
And eventually they kind of started to realize, like, this guy isn't what I thought he was.
They actually
He's not
started
what the
seeing you.
media says he is.
Right. And how many days did you go without eating?
11.
Oh man. So I mean, listen, when it comes down to it, and I've tried to, on the radio show, we've had this discussion over the past couple of days about the transgender movement and, how prominent and aggressive it has become. And I tried to really break it down for people. And even though we're probably pushing the boundaries and even sometimes saying things we're not supposed to say, I try to make the point that even with a lot of these trans people, they're still human. And just like the racist guards in D.C., to trans people, to yourself, to me, like there's a human element to every single person. And it's amazing to hear that those guards, as much as they wanted to see you suffer, once you were suffering to a certain extent, they were like, okay, let's show at least a little compassion.
Yeah.
That's what you saw.
Gandhi calls it self-suffering. And it's basically this idea that when you suffer without a good reason for suffering, like if an oppressor is forcing you to suffer and you're just going through it and you're a righteous, good person, then it awakens in the oppressor a certain level of compassion.
Wow.
and it transforms the heart and the mind of the oppressor, to getting them to identify with and have compassion for the oppressed.
That's interesting. So you get through all that. You get moved to, you said Oklahoma? Is that right?
Yeah, Oklahoma is used like a transit station for federal inmates. And so when people are being transferred across the country on Con Air, if they don't, if the Con Air plane isn't going to go to a certain area, they'll drop you off in Oklahoma, and then they'll leave you there for a week or 2 days or whatever it is. And then when that area of the country that you're going to be going to is going to be flying over with these Con Air planes, then they will pull you out of the jail in Oklahoma, and then they'll take you to the prison you're supposed to go to.
Tell me, tell me this. So when you get out of solitary confinement, you go to Oklahoma is when you get to general population, right? Do you build relationships with some of the inmates, and do you start talking to them about some of the stuff that you and I are talking about the, the psyops and the disinformation campaigns, and even Q? Are you open about that? Talking to people about that while you're still incarcerated?
Well, when I was in Oklahoma, I pretty much kept to myself.
Yeah.
Nobody really knew who I was. I mean, a couple people did, but nobody really knew. It didn't get around the general population area that I was in. It was a transit center, so nobody was kind of trying to develop any sort of relationship or friendship.
Right.
Um, that was more so when I got to Safford. And it wasn't that I was like evangelical about it. It wasn't that I was like zealot about it. It's just people would come up and talk to me,
Right.
and they'd be like, "So you're the guy, right? The guy with the horns and the face paint?"
You're right.
Like, yeah, that was me. Oh, dude, I got to shake your hand, bro. That was fucking crazy.
Right.
And then they'd start asking me about what I thought. They'd ask me about that day, and I told them everything that Tucker showed on his show. They didn't
Right.
believe me. you know.
Wow. So you're telling the story that Tucker told before Tucker told it,
I
and
was telling
nobody's
everybody
buying
in
it.
the prison. I was telling the guards. A lot of them didn't believe me.
Wow. Okay, and I want to get to the point that you find out that Tucker is doing what he's done, or that he's got his hands on the tape, so on and so
Oh, I
forth.
saw it.
Okay,
I
so
saw it that night.
and you're in this current. Would you say it was Stafford?
Safford.
Safford. Okay, so you're at Safford. What's the time frame on this date? General date.
I think it was March 8th or
So
March 7th of 2023.
okay, so March 7th ish, 2023. And are you aware in advance that
No,
Tucker's doing the show? You have no
no
idea.
idea.
And you're in prison. You're watching Fox News, and Tucker Carlson has an entire show dedicated to you.
Yeah, the inmates lost their shit.
God, I would have
Especially when
crapped
they
my
saw the
pants, bro.
footage.
Tucker Carlson does a show about me. I'm crapping my pants straight up.
Uh,
So what does everybody say? What is everybody in general population? Everybody knows you. What are they saying?
Well, when they saw that I was on the TV, all the other TVs, because there's in prison, you have a white person TV, you have a black person's TV, you have a Mexican, Native American. Like that's how it is in prison.
It's very pre-civil rights era.
Well, it's done for order and control.
Yeah.
Because before all that happened, what would happen is the biggest dude on the yard would come up and bully somebody and say, give me your pancakes, boy. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so it was done for order and control. Now, when the footage aired and they saw that I was on the TV, almost everybody in that area turned to Fox News to watch it on their TV. And then, I had a bunch of people coming up to me like, bro, you told us. Like, I didn't believe you.
This is the story you told us.
Yeah. And I was like, I fucking told you guys. Like, I understand why you didn't believe me, but I told you. I told you I don't lie. I can't lie. They thought I was a square. They pretty much told me I was a civilian. You know, because they're criminals. They view themselves almost like soldiers.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
So
So
what is it? What was their reaction before the Tucker stuff? What was their reaction when you were telling them the story of walking through the Capitol and being escorted by police? What did they say to you? They were just told you were full of it?
well, I don't want to get too much into the events of that day,
Yeah, just give
but
me their reaction.
I'll just say that they didn't believe me.
They didn't believe you at all.
They're like, yeah, you're a criminal, you're crazy, you know, you're a convict, you're a felon. Because I refused to have any of those titles, and I said so openly. Like, no, I'm not a criminal. No, I'm not a convict. I don't care if I have a felony. I'm not a felon. That's not how I see myself, and I'm not going to allow anybody to put that label on me.
Well, and there's probably, a lot of people that are in prison that are trying to play the full role of I'm innocent of the charges against me. So they're probably used to a lot of people saying that, which was easy for them to dismiss you when in reality, you were one of the few that was actually telling the truth.
That's one of the hardest things I think for them to grasp was that like who I was before I was in prison is who I was while I was in prison, and I wasn't going to allow prison to change me.
Right. So Tucker comes on, he does this expose. Um, the
It was a
prison
talk of the yard.
there was the talk of the yard. The prison yard goes nuts.
Yeah, what was really funny was that like there was a liberal talking head that Tucker Carlson like aired a soundbite of what this guy was saying. And as I said, in the prison, I had developed a reputation for being a square because I didn't break any rules, I didn't drink any hooch, I didn't do
Right.
anything I wasn't supposed to do. You know, I was talking to them about spiritual reformation, and I was teaching a metaphysics class. So I got the reputation for being a square, and then so this liberal talking head goes on was on like a clip of it was on Tucker Carlson's show, and the guy said, "This guy talking about me. This guy is a stone cold thug," and everybody just started laughing their asses off. You know, like yeah, Chansley's a stone cold thug, all right.
So you've got Don Lemon, you've got Wolf Blitzer, and all the rest talking about you're basically a stone cold killer, and the rest of the prison is just cracking up because they actually know that you're the church boy.
No, not a stone cold thug, not a gangster, not crazy. You know, none of this. And that's what I think was hard for a lot of them to deal with was that like they had come to live through the television and what was going on in the outside world.
That's all they knew.
Because that's all they knew. So then for them to meet the actual person and converse with them and then have that person be nothing like what they thought they were going to be, especially like some of the races that watch CNN. So they thought I was a racist.
Right.
They thought I was a white supremacist. And when they talked to me even just once, maybe twice at the most, they were like, this guy's not a racist.
So wait, yeah, those the people that did have that notion of you crazy Trump supporting racist, they saw the Tucker thing too. And their MO after that was what? How did they treat you?
Well, they already knew that none of the stuff in the media was true because they talked to me.
Gotcha.
But when that stuff aired, they really had like to wrap their minds around the idea that maybe what they were watching in the news on CNN was complete and utter horseshit.
Right. Well, it's amazing that even people in prison can start to identify fake news. With the lack of resources you have in prison, even those people realize the BS that's coming out of the mainstream media, the outright propaganda that we all see on a regular basis. That's pretty wild. All right, so Tucker comes on TV. You've got your own TV show. You're vindicated in prison to an extent. What happens next? Do you get a phone call from an attorney? But who do you hear from first after that airs?
Well, I called my mom like immediately, and I was like, "Mom, Tucker just did his show. He just did a whole show about me, and he showed all this footage. Like, can you get a hold of Bill, my attorney? You know, like, can you get a hold of Bill and like tell him to call me?
Right.
Because I'm quite certain this was not in the discovery, you know. So eventually my attorney got a hold of me, and but the thing is that by the time Tucker Carlson released that footage, I was already 3 weeks away from being released from prison.
Really?
So what's really interesting is how, like, 3 weeks after that footage airs and I get released to Halfway House, you got all these yuppie conservatives that are like, oh, we got him out. Oh, Tucker Carlson and Kevin McCarthy, they're patriots, they're heroes. We got Jake out. And it's like, no, dude. Like, all you'd have to do is look into the actual situation and realize that I was already going to be released. But the thing is, this is called confirmation bias, and everybody's got it, where they see a headline and then they think, oh, this aligns with what I already believe. It must be true.
So it just was happenstance that what Tucker Carlson did, when he did it, lined up with your release date that was already set. How long, like, what was the date of the Tucker Carlson piece, and then, or just generally, and then what was your release date? Like, what was the time frame there?
Well, I knew that I was getting out on the 28th of March, I think, like February 13th.
Okay.
And then the footage aired on the 7th of March or the 8th or something like that.
But you weren't released any time early, even a day early, because of the Tucker stuff.
Nope.
And I think that was a general, because I mean, I'm even partly guilty of it. I hadn't put a lot of thought into it, but I just assumed that that was a big part of you being released to a halfway house.
Nope.
That's interesting. Wow. So you get out of there.
Really quick. And this is why I don't trust anything I see on TV, bro. Because even every time I saw something in the media, whether it be the New York Times, the Washington Post, on CNN, even some of the stuff that was on Fox for a while, was just like, well, this isn't true. Now, here's the thing, and I'll give you an example, and I'll use Tucker Carlson as an example, okay? I believe it was on the 21st and the 22nd of July in 2022. Tucker Carlson went on his show and said that I was on mushrooms inside the Capitol, wandering around in circles, screaming about peace and making funny noises. Not true at all.
Right.
Okay? Was not on mushrooms. Where he got that, I have no idea.
Right.
There's nothing in the court documents. There's nothing in any news report. I never said I was on mushrooms. I mean, dude, if I wouldn't be there if I was on mushrooms, okay?
That'd be hard to pull off. I got to be honest.
Oh, dude, it'd be crazy. I'd be like, this is a bad trip. I got to get the hell out of here, you know? So the point I'm making is that, like, then it's like, what, 8 months later, something like that this story comes out where he uses my footage and, you know, everybody says I'm exonerated and all this other stuff. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is, even on Tucker Carlson's show, he said I was on mushrooms. I've had people commenting on my Twitter or on my Rumble videos that I was on mushrooms in the Capitol. And it's like, dude, you nincompoop. Where did you get that? Where did you get that?
Right. Although if you were on mushrooms inside the Capitol, it would probably make that place seem a little more normal than it actually is, if we're being honest. But
oh, dude, that would not be the place you'd want to trip.
That's crazy, though. And I don't want to go out and say that Tucker Carlson, you know, took credit for getting you released, because I don't ever.
He didn't. No, he didn't.
Yeah.
He's been asked, you know, did that footage have anything to do with his release? And he said, I don't know. I don't have any proof of that, basically, you know. But at the same time, Everybody else gave them the credit anyway.
Right. Everybody just assumed it.
Yes. Because they don't know what the fuck they're talking about.
Right.
And that's the thing, bro. And forgive me for putting it that way, but there's so much disinformation out there. There's so much misinformation out there that people don't know what the real information actually is.
Right.
So disinformation is things that are entirely false. Misinformation are things that are mixed with true and false. And information is things that are entirely true.
Right.
So there's so much misinformation and disinformation out there that people don't know what the actual information really is.
Well, and I think a lot of that is probably not probably it is by design, and we go back to the beginning of this where you were talking about what Q and QAnon actually was and what they did to muddy the waters there. That's bigger than just Q. That's just every bit of information that flows to the general public in general. They want to muddy the waters so that you can't get to the truth, and I think that's kind of what we have here in the sense of Donald Trump indictment, bribes to the Biden family, and everything else. So you get released from prison. You end up in a halfway house, from what I understand, and then you do your time there, and now you're back living as a free man, probably supervised release or whatever. Probation, yeah.
Yeah, supervised release. I'm still not totally, quote unquote, free, but I'm a lot more free than being in prison.
You're freer than you were, yeah.
Now, here's the thing. What you're talking about the muddying of the waters, right? That's why I call the media the Operation Mockingbird media. Are you familiar with Operation Mockingbird?
I've heard it before. I'm not completely familiar with it.
That's when the CIA infiltrated all the major media outlets in like the 60s and the 70s during the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement.
Right.
Okay, that has not gone away. I'm sure you've seen that video where there's all those talking heads all over the country and those news stations where they're talking about social media and the spreading of false information without checking facts first and how this is very dangerous to our democracy.
Yeah.
Okay. Operation Mockingbird, bro. It's right there.
That's it. I agree,
so
man.
That's the goal, though. That's the goal, is to muddy the waters, is to cover up government corruption, is to keep the war machine and the money train going, is to ensure that the status quo in DC is never disturbed, that the deep state continues to function like a tightly knit, highly efficient machine, like what JFK used to call it. That is the goal. It is literally a massive psychological operation being perpetrated on the public. I mean, Donald Trump just came out and said that psychological warfare tactics were being used on the public the last several years. I promise you, it wasn't just the last 7 years.
Yeah, he made those comments at his speech after the indictment or the arrest, the arraignment. So what's funny is the comments from JFK you were just referencing. That portion of that particular speech plays at the beginning of my intro on my radio show every single day because, as you said, it still applies today. And I get that from listeners all the time. They say, man, I love that JFK speech you play every day. And I'm like, yeah, you love it because it's relevant. Every time I hit these airwaves, I'm talking to you about stuff that makes that speech relevant. And the points you make, it's crazy because, and I may have been guilty of it as well, just thinking that, okay, the shaman guy is he's a different kind of guy. He's out there, people probably think you're a flat earther and a hippie and all this kind of stuff. But all the points you just made are, even if as different as you and I are, those are the same exact points that I make on the radio show and I make on these podcasts almost on a daily basis. All of those things are true. The war machine, it's true. The disinformation, it's true. All of that. This is why, and I'd like to know kind of where you stand on it. The war machine is why Donald Trump is being attacked in the manner he is, because he threatens that very war machine, that money-making machine for permanent Washington, for the Uniparty.
That's correct. So let's talk about that real quick. And this idea of a uniparty or a deep state. The uniparty, the deep state, is actually a fourth branch of government. And we call it the bureaucracy. Okay. So the founders divided our government into three separate branches with checks and balances so they could divide power and would not have what they call tyranny. Now, the founders' definition of tyranny was when you combine legislative, the ability to create law, executive, the ability to enforce that law, and judicial, which is the ability to adjudicate that law, into a single centralized power, which is what they were dealing with the crown and the king in England, right? The king owned all of those things. So that was their definition of tyranny. That's why they divided it into these three different branches of government with checks and balances. Now, when we talk about the bureaucracy in the federal government is comprised of over 500 regulatory agencies. So the Constitution gives the government the ability to, quote unquote, regulate commerce in the United States. These bureaucratic agencies are tasked with regulating commerce. Okay. Now, through the power that these bureaucratic agencies have been given by the Congress, by the legislative branch, the bureaucratic agencies have created regulations. And these regulations, in large part, are written by the very corporations that the bureaucratic agencies are supposed to be regulating.
Right.
Okay. So this is why the FDA works with Big Pharma, because it's about taking public money and putting it into private hands, right? Non-government organizations, corporations, etc. Now, the people that are the heads of these bureaucratic agencies are not elected officials. They are appointed officials, and they are appointed by the president, and they are vetted by the Congress, and then they are placed at their top of their pyramid of power, this bureaucratic agency. Now, that being said, people like Fauci are a perfect example of what the deep state is made up of. It is made up of somebody, which Fauci was appointed by Reagan, okay? Somebody that has been in power for far longer than the person that appointed them. Now, think about this. If he's been in that office for almost 40 years, then all of the people that he appoints below him, which he has the authority to do, they're going to be in line with his agenda.
Right.
And if his agenda is nefarious or if it is a globalist agenda, then he's going to be in line with these big pharma and the globalists when it comes to regulating commerce. So look at it like this. I've just explained how from the top down, these bureaucratic agencies are corrupted and how they can actually grow exponentially corrupt over many years, many decades, as these individuals stay in power longer than the people that appointed them, right? And if you corrupt the presidency and that presidency elects somebody who is equally corrupt into these bureaucratic agencies, then the bureaucracy can grow in corruption exponentially. Now, the bureaucratic agencies are not just able to regulate commerce. In a way, those regulations are a creation of law. Okay? Now, bureaucratic agencies are also able to enforce that law through their own law enforcement aspects of these agencies. They're able to enforce their regulations, and they have their own administrative courts that are completely outside of the federal court system. So what have we got here with the bureaucracy? We have their ability to create law through creating regulations, their ability to enforce that law through their bureaucratic law enforcement agents, and they have the ability to adjudicate that law in their own administrative bureaucratic courts. So what do we have? We have tyranny.
Exactly.
And there's 500 federal agencies doing this.
Yeah, that's what's it's a fascinating point because I mean, outside of commerce, and you see, especially with the CDC director outgoing, and she won't admit it under oath, but she'll likely go work for Pfizer or somebody that she made billions and billions of dollars. The DOJ is very similar in the sense of these people don't come and go. Yeah, you see attorney generals come and go, but the people in the FBI, even FBI directors and everything, like these people stick around. And a new president comes in. I think about what Donald Trump was faced with when he took power, when he took office in 2017. And, the very people like Comey and others that were working against him from the time before he even was elected, he had to just trust them. And that corruption was so deep, thus the deep state, that it's been around for a long time. You had an outsider coming in and do it. That's kind of what we're dealing with Trump's, recent situation in the sense of appointments. You've got Merrick Garland that is appointed by Joe Biden. Nobody voted for Merrick Garland, but he's there. He's the one calling the shots, and his boss, the guy that appointed him, is Joe Biden. That's why I try to explain to people, no matter what they say on TV or on the internet or whatever, like that Joe Biden has nothing to do with it. He can tell you 100 times over he doesn't talk to Merrick Garland about. He's doing, or Merrick Garland's doing what Joe Biden asked him to do. There's no other way to cut it, and that's what's your, and I'm just trying to wrangle this in the sense of what's your take on what is going on with Donald Trump, the DOJ, and this current classified document situation, Jack Smith and all the rest?
Well, let me start by saying I don't always agree with Donald Trump. That doesn't mean I don't support him. I still support him, but I don't always agree with him.
You support him for 2024?
Yeah, definitely over Ron DeSantis.
Yeah.
But the point is that part of the reason why I support him so much is because they're going after him so much.
And you know what that's like.
Well, not just that, yeah, for sure. But if they were really trying to go after people that were corrupt, they would have gone after Hillary. They would have gone after Joe. They would have gone after Obama. They would have gone after John McCain. They would have gone after Eric Swalwell. They would have gone after people like Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan, people that have taken money from Chinese corporations. The point, I guess, is that there's all sorts of corruption in D.C. That is the rule, not the exception. Okay? And so if they were really trying to go after people that were corrupt, they would have been going after people that were corrupt a long time ago. Eric Holder, Fast and Furious. All that happened was that he basically stepped down,
right?
Resigned.
Held in contempt of Congress.
What's that?
Held in contempt of Congress and was never punished for it.
Never punished, yeah, but we got people that are held in the Congress going to jail.
Right.
Why? When somebody was literally trapped, the Attorney General was literally trafficking firearms illegally to cartel members, a foreign terrorist group that is dealing drugs, kidnapping people, and murdering people. And the government is literally arming them with American-made guns so they can create a psyop that guns are too easy to get a hold of for these cartel members. And all that happens is the guy he's subpoenaed to Congress. He doesn't show up, and he just steps down. Media squashes it.
It's amazing too, because if you go and just ask any random person on the street, what's more scandalous, a gun store selling an AR-15 or an attorney general selling AR-15s to the cartels, their main concern would be the ability for people to purchase an AR-15 in this country. The gun violence is the number one issue.
Maybe if they are in a blue state, I don't see that. I see more people being concerned about the government arming cartel members.
Right.
Personally, but that all depends on the state that you're in. and how heavy the brainwashing and psychological warfare campaign is being perpetrated on that population.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are waking up. It's easy for us, and I'm at fault, and I think a lot of my listeners are at fault for, just getting really down and discouraged by seeing people. You see clips of man on the street stuff, and they go around a college campus and start asking people questions, common sense questions, maybe, history questions of, or who was our founding fathers, or when was this country discovered, blah, blah, blah. And people, they have no idea. And I think that distorts our view of the country a little bit, because I think a lot of people over the past few years have started waking up. Even with this Trump indictment, Trump arraignment, I think is waking a lot of people up. You mentioned Ron DeSantis. There's a lot of people. I had listeners text my show today that said they were done with Trump until this latest indictment, and not only have they gone back because they know what that means, but they're donating to the campaign. That's a pretty big jump, to being done with Trump, to back on the Trump train, and then sending money to the campaign. All the poll numbers obviously reflect that, and hopefully that's a sign of the general population starting to wake up. But it's not just waking people up; it's figuring out how to fix elections in the sense of making them right, making them fair, which is not going to happen by 2024. But we can try to at least make it right enough in order to outvote the cheating. But first, we obviously have a GOP primary. And again, you mentioned Ron DeSantis. You said you would obviously vote for Trump over Ron DeSantis. Tell me why that is. I'm a Trump guy. I'm voting for Trump. I make that very clear on all my shows. But I'm curious your stance on Ron DeSantis, because I got a feeling it's probably similar to mine.
Well, I break it down to three simple things. Number one, Donald Trump is the reason why Ron DeSantis got elected governor of Florida. And Ron DeSantis turned his back on Trump and then stabbed him in the back. Number two, DeSantis pretty much said he was not going to run for president. He would stay the governor of Florida. And then that was in late 2022. And now here we are, not even, 6 months into 2023, and he's already running for president?
Right.
So he stabbed the people of Florida in the back. Okay. And lastly, Ron DeSantis running for the presidency in 2024 in all this primary stuff, it's going to tear the Republican Party apart in a way that could very much help the Democrats, number one. But number two, during a time where we really need to be united as conservatives and as Republicans. Now, I really think the Republicans are just as corrupt as the Democrats.
Right.
Okay? But if I had to go one way or the other, I'd go the Republican route. But dude, Republicans can be just as draconian as the Democrats. They can be just as self-righteous. So that's why I'm a libertarian. But the whole thing about DeSantis, he turned his back on Trump and then stabbed him in the back by running against him. He turned his back on the people of Florida and stabbed them in the back by running for president and telling him he wasn't going to. And number three, he's turning his back on the American people by dividing the Republican Party at a time where we really need to be united and not divided. That will only help the Democrats. And it makes me wonder who's whispering in Ron DeSantis' ear. Who's telling him, run against Trump and you will get in the presidency. And things going to be beautiful for you. I mean, to me, it's like, do we really want to trust a man who for 4 years was showing us one face, and he is a career politician, by the way? Do we really want to depend on a career politician who stabs the man who helped him, the people of his state, and the Republican Party in the back to go into Washington, D.C. and fix D.C.?
Right.
Is he really going to do that?
My problem is that we continue to have this comparison, and he uses this on the campaign trail. Now, I don't hate the guy. I don't even dislike him passionately. I'll say that. But the comparisons of I'm going to go to D.C. and I'm going to do it right. I'm going to fix all these things. I'm going to fix the corrupt Justice Department and all this. I did it in Florida. I can do it in Washington, D.C. And I hate to break it to you because, Washington, D.C. ain't Florida. Washington, D.C. is not red Florida with a super majority. And on top of that, I think is what is driving people away from Ron DeSantis right now. One, you say, who's wanting him to run? Who's whispering in his ear? Well, it's the people that want Trump defeated. It's Mitch McConnell. It's others that are going to be raising large sums of money for him because Ron DeSantis can't do it on his own. He's got a lot to learn. He's very robotic. He's not as charismatic as he needs to be, so on and so forth. But what really chapped my backside over the past couple of days was the silence from the DeSantis camp while Trump was being indicted and arraigned in Ron DeSantis' state. The only GOP nominee in Florida, in Miami for that, was Vivek Ramaswamy, who called out the rest of the field and said, I'm putting out a pledge that if they convict Donald Trump and I'm elected, I'm going to pardon him, and I demand answers from everybody else. I don't think anybody answered. I think everybody's on the opposite end of that. But that is going to damage Ron DeSantis in a way that I don't think, no matter how much fundraising the Senate Leadership Fund does, is going to help him get the nomination. But like you said, only going to divide the Republican Party more on the way to the primaries and the general election.
That's right. And D.C. is uniparty. And it is a deep state, a fourth branch of government that is in many ways tyrannical, that has run amok. And this is something I didn't mention earlier, but I think it's important to mention now. The international corporate apparatuses with which the bureaucratic agencies of the government are working with, also the same bureaucratic agencies are working with criminal organizations. We look into the Contras and the CIA trafficking cocaine into the country, or the trafficking of heroin into the country during Vietnam, into the coffins of dead soldiers. We look into Operation Fast and Furious. We look into the massive amount of money that has basically disappeared from the defense budget. I mean, $2 trillion is what Donald Rumsfeld said on 9/10/2001.
Right.
So to me, it's like, okay, it's very clear at this point that the black market and what we call the free market, which is actually a monopolized market because only 150 corporations exist that virtually control all the resources and all the labor in the world. These two parallel markets are one and the same. And governments all over the planet have been corrupted and are working in collusion with this black market. I mean, look at what's happening at the border with child and human slavery.
Right.
We call child and human trafficking. It's the slave trade.
Yeah,
it's the modern day slave trade. And that's what we need to start calling it, because that's what it is. You know what I mean? So think about it. The human slavery is the most lucrative black market industry on the planet. Next is drugs. Next is arms trade. Now, we have clearly seen the government's hands in all three of those pies for the last several decades. And I could cite example after example after example if you want, but I'm not going to, because I'm pretty sure you're a well-read man and you know that what I'm saying is true. And I'd like to believe that your audience is as well-read and informed as you are. So I don't trust people. I don't trust institutions. I trust pattern. And if I see the same pattern that is happening right now has happened for decades prior, then I'm inclined to believe that this idea of the monopolized market and the black market being one and the same is a very real thing.
I think I'm with you on that. I mean, you've got it's crazy because as you speak, it's for me as a radio show host. Like when I take phone calls and I interact with people, it's usually one thing at a time. But like when you speak, you have so many things to unpack, which I'm not going to be able to do. But all that's nail on the head stuff. I mean, even with the trafficking going on at the border, people don't understand that it's slavery, and that slavery is not just at the border. It's within the country, all over the country, especially as this massive number of migrants surge the border and get spread out all over the country, even as Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott and everybody else start shipping migrants here, there, Blue City, so on and so forth. That's not really helping. It's just for show, and it's continuing the trafficking and the slavery that was already going on. It's just spreading it out, making it harder to find. All of this, it works in tandem with the overall plan. When you talk about globalists and everything, I'm on the same page with you, man. I completely get it, and this is the stuff which, hey, working in corporate media at a major radio station like I do, some people get squeamish when I start talking about that stuff, but it's true, and I think so many people are waking up to it and starting to understand because the pieces are being put together. I went through, what was it? I think in the last week, the basically the Communist Handbook, and it gives 45 points of how to make your way to communism in America. And if you read through those point by point, it's basically the equivalent of just reading off the points of the Democrat platform. It all lines up perfectly, and everything going on in this country is just that. That's what the people that own everything, the Black Rocks and the Vanguards and everything, they're all doing the same. They all got the same initiative, and they're pulling the strings for everybody else. You look at Bud Light, all right? Bud Light. Why would you put Dylan Mulvaney up there? You know your audience. You're not stupid. Well, they're doing it because that's what they've been told to do. When people like these investors have more money than they will ever need, they get kind of bored. This is the way it seems. I'm not saying this is the way but it seems as if they got so much money they just get bored and they say, okay, so what can we do? Let's start pushing this trans agenda.
Well, hold on a
people.
second, though. Really quick, are you familiar with the Corporate Equity Index? I believe that's
vaguely.
what it's called. It's basically a social credit score for corporations and schools.
Yes.
And it's funded and run by the George Soros Open Society Foundation. And basically what it is that it's like a corporate social credit score where you have to tick all these boxes. And if you don't tick all these boxes, then what's going to happen is that not only are you not going to get the money at the carrot at the end of the string, okay, but then anybody that does business with you isn't going to get money or advertising. And you're going to have these woke mobs outside of your corporation talking about how you are not doing the right thing for trans people or whatever, okay? So the idea here is that they have created what is called full spectrum dominance, okay, where they control everything on the land, on the seas, everything in the air and the airspace, subterranean, deep underground military bases, space and space technology, chemical and biological agents, technology, and the mind, psychological warfare. This is full spectrum dominance. It's a military term, okay? Now, the governments are colluding with international corporations and international governments and international bankers to maintain full spectrum dominance. And they're pushing this trans agenda, this LGBTQIA, whatever you want to call it, this alphabet agenda, because the globalists behind the whole full spectrum dominant system are pushing it. Now, are you familiar with Sun Tzu, Art of War?
Yes.
Okay, so in Sun Tzu, Art of War, he talks about how if you want to know who your spies are, what you do is you give each spy you give each of your generals a different piece of disinformation. And then if that different piece of disinformation ends up in the enemy camp, then you know who your spy is.
Right.
So this is equivalent to dropping a different color of dye in each of these different little holes and then seeing where the leak comes from.
Right.
Right. So if we look at, for example, have somebody having the LGBTQ flag in front of their store, or the Black Lives Matter or Antifa flag or whatever, then that is the equivalent of seeing who is in line with this globalist apparatus. It's the dye in the water.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's that makes a lot of sense. And this ESG and whatever they call it, social credit score type of stuff. This is, it's something that as you said, they're going to attempt to use to take over the world. They've tested it in places like, I believe, Sweden is maybe where they started out with this stuff and completely wrecked their economy. You think of the Dutch farmers that were revolting because of this thing, because they were promised the world. They say, hey, if you want your country to be rich, we've got all the money, cuz we can make you rich. We can give you whatever you want. You've just got to subscribe to this. Well, they did, and it completely wrecked them. And so their societies start to revolt because they're running out of stuff. They're running out of food and money and everything else. And that's what they're looking for. They're looking for that revolt. They're looking for that chaos. That's why they still elections right in front of your face, whether it's the U.S. or Brazil. They want that unrest. They want people in the streets clashing with police or the military, because the simple notion of divide and conquer. Conquer is the end game. That's what they're looking to do. That's all they've ever been looking to do. It's just now they're brave enough to do it right in front of you.
Right. Well, and that's why in all of my podcasts, in all of my interviews, in all of the spaces I've been in on Twitter, I advocate for a couple of things. Number one, nonviolent non-cooperation. It worked in India with Gandhi. It worked in the United States with Martin Luther King Jr. It worked in Romania with the fall of communism. Okay. So every time it's tried, it works. And we want to do what works. We don't want to play into their hands and be violent, because violence, it creates not only more violence, but it also creates an excuse for these globalist authorities who have a monopoly on the initiation of force to come in and clamp down and say these people are violent extremists, these people need to be taken to prison, they need to be rounded up, etc. Now, there's another thing that I've advocated for heavily, because obviously the system that the globalists have created, in which they have full spectrum dominance, must be made obsolete. Okay. So, but destroying it is not going to be the answer. What we want to do is create a better system. Instead of using our energy to fight the old, we need to use our energy to build something new. That's why I talk about Tesla Tower technology. That's why I talk about Dr. Rife, that's R-I-F-E, and his machine that he invented in the 1930s that can cure cancer and pretty much any disease. That's why I tell people to vote with their money, because all three of these things can disarm the globalist system through nonviolence, through non-cooperation, and we can literally spend our energy, our time so much more effectively. So think about this, for example. Over half of the wars that have been fought in the last several decades have been about resources and the procuring of resources.
Right.
So if we make resources infinite, war is obsolete. Okay. Half of the poverty and crime is based on not having enough resources. So if we make resources infinite, like what Tesla Tower technology has the capability of doing, then poverty and crime can be eliminated, or at least reduced drastically. Another example of how Tesla Tower technology will change everything. It can change our supply chain, our transportation systems. It can change our communication systems. So we're not using globalist run international corporations and cell phones and cell phone towers and all that stuff. We aren't going to have to worry about creating nuclear power plants or coal-based electricity that's coming from coal, burning coal. We won't have to worry about wind turbines killing birds. We won't have to worry about solar panels and their 50 toxic chemicals making their way into the soil. We won't have to worry about lithium mining and the damage that does to the environment. We won't have to worry about oil drilling. We won't have to worry about fracking. All of that stuff just goes away, right? Because it's made obsolete. And the globalists control all of that stuff.
Right.
Okay, all of it. So not only does it solve all these problems, but it also creates a new system that they don't control. And they can't control because it's all decentralized. It makes every man, woman, and child independent because they literally have the power in their hands. Okay. Now, Dr. Rife and his machine and its cure for cancer, the way that basically you can shatter a wine glass with sound and frequency, you can shatter a cancer cell with sound and frequency. You just have to know the right frequency and you can kill the cancer. And you can do so without any damage to healthy human tissue. And you can do this for cents on a dollar. Okay. So these two inventions have been suppressed for almost for Nikola Tesla for over 100 years, but Dr. Rife for like 90 something years. So what do we have here? We have government corruption from its inception, right? Exposed to the public and anybody that looks into this research. Number two, we have a bunch of patents that could literally give us a brand new system that totally makes the old globalist system obsolete. And this is, I think, the most important part, okay? If you understand how both of these inventions work, then you understand the secrets of the universe because they operate based on energy, frequency, and vibration. And you will understand how your body, your mind, all of these things are energy, frequency, and vibration. And the whole reason why we have such distorted socioeconomic and geopolitical systems is because our spiritual view of reality is so distorted and so corrupted by entities like the Catholic Church. So getting these three things in line, our spiritual, our socioeconomic, and our geopolitical, and getting rid of the government corruption, all of these things are in these two packages right here.
Yeah, and I think of what we do know is all the things we've talked about. Globalists, our own governments around the world. Those are the things that they have taken away from us and continue to attempt to take away from us. Is one, our individualism, two, our freedoms, our health, and what they've done to the food supply over the years. All these things, you as an individual, as a person, as a unique being, which every one of us are. I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican, transgender. I mean, I don't know that Nancy Pelosi is an actual human, but for the most part, we're all individual humans with our own selves, our own personalities, our own DNA, our own fingerprints. They want to take all of that away because they want to continue, and they have to an extent, enslave the entire globe. Not just America, but the entire globe. We all got to be on the same page, doing the same thing, answering to the same people, because at the end of the day, and what I've said a million times on the show, is that when they talk about not just eradicating religion, but eradicating your ability to have a relationship with God, they want that gone because they view themselves as your God. They want to be the ones that you answer to, that you ask for help. That's why they wreck your economy, because they want you dependent on them. And they've advanced that mission so far over the years, and especially during COVID. That's the ultimate goal. Now, just to wrap this thing up, Jake, I want you to tell my audience, and this has been absolutely fascinating, by the way. The only downside is, because I've agreed with you so much, I'm going to be now labeled as a QAnon conspiracy theorist. But maybe Tucker will do a show about me one day, and that'll be cool. Make it even. But if you have one message to send to my audience that watches or listens to this podcast, what would it be?
You are far more powerful than you have been led to believe by your schools, your college professors, the media, and your politicians. Within you is a power that is greater than anything you can possibly imagine. If you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you can move mountains. Have I not said, ye are gods? These things and greater you will also do. Within you lies a very real potential to create reality. This is something quantum physics has come to show and prove time and time and time again. It's what the mystics have said for millennia. It's what Christ talked about over 2,000 years ago. It's what all the shamans, saints, and sages have been saying for thousands of years. So I come to you with a very clear message. Do not sell your loyalty to institutions. Do not sell your loyalty to government. Do not sell your loyalty to monetary gain. Do not sell your loyalty to individuals. Sell your loyalty to your own heart. Sell your loyalty and invest your loyalty into your soul, into the truth that has been echoed throughout the ages, that ye are God, that these things and greater you will also do. And if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you will move mountains. And unity, love, peace, forgiveness, and freedom. These are going to be our pillars to build a brand new society, to lift ourselves up out of this globalist engineered poverty. These things will be the foundation of our future civilization. The only way that we can do that is if we agree on things that we are not normally discussing. That's why I talk about Tesla Tower technology and all of the things it can do for us. That's why I talk about Dr. Rife and his machine and its cure for cancer and other diseases. That's why I tell people to vote with their money. Look at what happened when Dylan Mulvaney was put on a beer can. Bud Light took like a $26 billion hit. Look at what happened when Target started pushing all this satanic trans agenda stuff on people, on kids in particular. They took a $16 billion hit. Now, I want you to think about the idea of what we can do if we vote with our money every day, if we stop buying from subsidiaries of like Monsanto, okay? Because Monsanto is literally destroying the planet, and they're giving all of us cancer through, I mean, they've been many class action lawsuits because of glyphosate causing cancer, okay? All of these globalist run organizations can be bankrupted. The world can be a better place, seriously, in 6 months to a year. Everything can change for the better. We can make this a Garden of Eden. We can make this an abundant world for everybody, and especially for our children and 7 generations from now. But the only way that we can do this is if we unite around these 3 things. These 3 things that I've just mentioned. Every Republican and Democrat voter can agree. If there's a cure for cancer, it should be released to the public in spite of the effects on the pharmaceutical companies' profits. Everybody can agree. If there's an infinite, free, clean form of wireless electricity and energy, then it should be released to the public in spite of the fact that GE will take a hit and that the oil companies will take a hit and that the solar panels and the lithium battery companies, they're all going to take a hit. Everybody can agree that this is the route to go because it's the only one that will create a sustainable future. So with all that said, see it. The future is bright, baby. And it's right around the corner. You have to see it to believe. If you have to see it to believe it, then you're not going to get there. You have to believe it, then you're going to see it.
I like it, man. That's I got to tell you. Well, first of all, before we get out of here, I want you to quickly tell people how they can find you. We mentioned you've got a podcast, you've got a website, and all that jazz. Let people know where they can find more about Jake Chansley.
Okay, so my Twitter handle is at America Shaman. That's America Shaman, at America Shaman. You can find me there. You can also find my website, ForbiddenTruthAcademy.com. That's ForbiddenTruthAcademy.com. Go to ForbiddenTruthAcademy.com, and you can find my website. My podcast. You can find a bunch of free courses that you can take. Like I said, totally free. These things talk about all sorts of stuff from AI to the spiritual nature of reality to how you can increase your IQ and create reality consciously through like the power of manifestation and law of attraction. We got one there also about the truth about climate change and how it has nothing to do with carbon emissions. And it's more so that the poles are shifting and there's massive anthropogenic chemical pollution that's destroying ecosystems. I've given everybody everything that they could possibly need on that website. There's also a link to my books. There's also a link to all of our merch, which we've got some really good merch. There's some really funny stuff.
You really do. I gotta admit.
Oh yeah, dude, you'll love it. It's good. And we also have links to people that want to book me for further interviews, or I'm also a spiritual / philosophical / political consultant. If you want to do like a consultation or something, I charge by the hour. You can just go and click on that page as well. It's on the website, forbiddentruthacademy.com.
Perfect, man. I gotta say, this has been fascinating. I mean, I knew it was going to be fascinating, but it exceeded my expectations. It was really great to not just hear your side of things, but to hear who you really are, because there's not a lot of people out there that got to know who Jake Chansley is outside of the guy known as the QAnon Shaman with the horns at the Capitol and everything else. So I think this is going to be very informative for a lot of people, and I'm grateful that you sat down with me for this, and I look forward to having you on the radio show to talk a little more about all this jazz too. I appreciate you, buddy, so much.
Thank you. The honor is mine. I really appreciate being here, and I look forward to the interview on the radio.
So that's Jake Chansley, the shaman himself, and thank you, the Over the Line audience. I appreciate you guys so much. Don't forget to subscribe to the website. Also, thank you to Wild Hair Jerky and to Vapor Forge. If it weren't for those guys, we wouldn't be able to do any of this. Until next time, see you, cuz.